And I find in the first one, when the projects are first coming up, if we get 10 eyes or 12 eyes or 8 eyes, whatever, are better to seeing problems and potential issues than 2 sets of eyes. So again, their input could be valuable. One thing that we saw is while there was training going on in both departments, there was not necessarily coordinated in having the same training going on, and there was not, the training with the career staff was hit or miss, depending on when it was, who was doing it, what time of the day, because there's overtime issues, there's time, staffing issues that need to take place. We also looked at, that training should also include not only the basics of doing their job, but also the town emergency plan, and then again, individual guidelines for the department. I know that I'm talking to the chiefs. They are working, and they've been doing some of that stuff and trying to put some of that stuff together. But again, we think that should be a little bit more coordinated. Again, career staff training is hit or miss. Depends on who's on, what time, and again, if it's after their workday, then there's an issue of overtime and funding and finances for that. I don't believe there's actually a coordinated, even between both career staffs, as to what they're going to do that day. I think there are some successes there, but I'm not sure it's 100%. One thing that you haven't done, or we couldn't find anything that designates that the Flanders Fire Department and Niantic Fire Department are your fire and emergency medical responders. You need to declare that. You probably have in some insurance paperwork, but that needs to be out there, because the other thing that's supposed to happen, we need to have, OSHA requires that you have a statement that talks about the whole creation of the fire department and emergency services, where they came from, how they were put together, who they work for, who's in charge, all of that stuff. There's a document that needs to be created. And we found some mission statements, and we found a treasure trove of information in Niantic. Someone wrote a Bible of information on everything that ever happened there, but we don't have an organizational statement.
Can you give me a couple examples of that along the way? Just send that over to me so we'll have something to work with.
Yep.
Thank you.
The other thing that we talked a little bit about is a bulk purchasing program. We saw this in a couple ways. Like, there is some stuff. There's some rescue equipment. There's some hose and some other things like that. But we're looking at right down to paper towels and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't know if the town has a bulk purchasing process where, again, if somebody, finance or whoever, needs paper towels, that they're all coming from the same vendor. Again, these are all economies of scale things.
Right.
The big thing with them is going out, and they started it, is going out and picking up the rescue equipment so it's the same and those things. So we got some good stuff there, but we're looking at a little bit more expanse than that. Again, this was the slide before. We just think there should be a full-time career fire chief over the top to kind of coordinate all these things.
One of the things that we saw during the review on many cases, that there was a lot of successes in each of the organizations, but those successes didn't overlap each other, and they weren't done together.
Right.
You had a number of groups that were taking on initiatives to advance their organization, but it didn't include others. Or we heard that there was 4 or 5 different groups that had a say in what the emergency services is doing in the town of East Lyme. But again, none of them were saying, okay, we do it together. Nick already alluded to the capital planning. Mm-hmm. You didn't have the overall capital plan, so it's hard for government to be able to visualize where you're going when you don't have that, from the buildings, from the apparatus, from long-term purchases. So the whole vision of that person is to bring all these, what I call the cylinders, get them all to come together into one and work together.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We talked about this, this is just a piggyback. Again, we leave the three, the chiefs would be kept in charge of their departments, and then we would just have the deputy fire marshal, EMD. We saw in the bylaws, there were different minimum qualifications for all the officer positions. Again, a standardization there would be good. 2 sets of standing operating guidelines or procedures. Again, that's something that could be melded into one. And then this isn't like 2 people sitting in a room. This is, you can set a committee up, members of each department, or the leaders of each department, and then, again, someone just herding that and keeping that in a forward process. And I know, again, to the credit particularly of the new chiefs, they're working on trying to get some of the stuff already nailed out.
Good.
This right here is, without a doubt, will probably be the longest and messiest. Not impossible, but this is, I think, personally, this is one of the reasons we're here. Is you need to negotiate out a plan between the East Lyme ambulance and the town of East Lyme, and to look at the financial parameters, money in, money out. When you're looking at the overall budget, there's a tremendous amount of money that's provided by the ambulance to the fire companies for a multitude of things, from gasoline to turnout gear to gas cards to everything, to 2/3 of the rescue truck for Flanders. There's a lot of financing, a lot of money that's coming in from the ambulance. Now, the other side of that, the other side of the coin is that money that's coming into the ambulance, part of the personnel that are raising that money or earning that money are career staff that this town pays for. Both valid arguments. But you need to sit down together and hammer it out. Because until that happens and until you come to a meeting of the minds, there's going to be this rub. There's going to be this rub. And I understand it's not a new one. It's many, many years. A lot of decisions in the past probably were poorly made. And as a result, the hair on people's back of their heads went up, and they're not willing to really release that. On the other hand, there's money coming in. We did not, and we're not suggesting at all that there was any misappropriation of money. That's not our point here. Our point is that they need things under the government. Your job is to get them those things, and there's this pot of money that's out there that's being used to get them those things, but it's not under your control. It's under their control, and we see that as that's obvious. People have complained to us that that's a rub. They got a lot of money coming in. They're doing good things with it, but are they doing the good things that you think they should be doing, or are they doing the good things that they should be doing? And who gets to make that decision?
Right.
So, and this is not new. This happens all over the country. At a certain point, as soon as this started spiking and volunteer companies determined that they could start charging, or career staff started charging, suddenly people in town hall who didn't want nothing to do with it said, "Ooh, look at that." So you're in the same battle, but all those other places have negotiated deals.
Right.
And it's just whether it's negotiating for space, it's negotiating to support part of their salary, whatever it is. But one thing that's been made very clear to us is you need to come to something in the middle, because you can't have, if we're going to go all one way, then the money going to the ambulance is going to stop. And those costs that you don't have to incur now are going to be there. So there needs to be a deal negotiated.
Right.
A little long-winded, I apologize for that, but this was the number one issue.
Were you able to quantify the money? You did a lot of research. Were you able to find out what the value is?
They have, the executive board for the ambulance has all those records, yep.
Okay. I'm going to try to get that.
All right, and again, their system for how to develop that and deliver that is a good system. The problem is there's a partner in the big game missing.
Mm-hmm.
Inversely, when you go to decide whether you're going to buy this, that, or the other thing, there's a partner in the big game missing.
Right.
So you need to get together
Thank you.
and come up with a process. It's not a new problem. It will not take place in 30 days. This is going to be a lot of back and forth and a lot of give and take. And both sides are going to have to be willing to look at the end result, which is the customer.
Right.
In an effort to kind of bring this to a discussion point, you'll find in the report, we give you a case study of where another community sat down and brought people together, and they came up with a plan, and they actually put an equation together, so they can quantify the reimbursement back to the community based on what the ambulance billing would be, and the amount of effort that the career people are putting in, the space they take up inside the town-owned firehouses, the heat, the electricity. There's all those portions, things, all were put into an equation, and then they come up with a figure, and then it periodically. And we use that as an example in the report. Just not to say that's the know-all, do-all,
Right.
but it's to give you a starting point for
Skeleton.
discussion.
Yep. Thank you.
This was another issue that we kind of went out on a limb on. Not everybody agrees with us, but right now when someone dials 911, it goes to the 911 center, and then they ring a phone to ask the on-duty crew what they want to send for equipment. This can all be computerized. It can all be commuted to be a part of a computer-aided dispatch system, and that's just the next step. That's just the next step. We think you can do quite a bit with this, particularly understanding you're creating a new dispatch center and changing how that process or who's in charge of the dispatch.
We've enhanced
anyway.
the dispatch center. It's now a police dispatch because
But
of
our understanding is there are computer-aided dispatch
Yes.
capabilities in there.
Yes.
And inversely, when you get done sending the information back to the dispatch, to the troops for the reports will be easier.
Right.
And this is another one of those recommendations that fell out as we look at how the call was handled and the time of dispatch and the response time. And Nick talked about the response time at the beginning of this.
Right.
You know, we look at the time to take the call, the time to dispatch the call, the time for the person to get in the apparatus, the time for the apparatus to drive to the location of where the emergency is. And you factored in all those things, and you just found where there was extra minutes or extra 35 or 40 seconds that added to those timelines.
It's nice to say I'm gonna make sure I put this out the right way. It's nice to want to have our volunteer recruitment program. It's nice to have a couple of people working on that and doing their very best. But I think what needs to happen is you need to get together with them and come up with a plan that includes funding and other types of supports that will make it so that the fire departments can at least get a real good shot at increasing the volunteer numbers.
The volunteer organizations have tried, they're working, and I was surprised when we did the review of, with everything else that goes on in East Lyme, how there was very little targeted the volunteer fire service to keep the volunteers involved, keep them engaged, and keep them here long-term. And this really needs to be a community effort, and if you're going to save the complete volunteer system where it is today. And it's going to take some effort. You are bucking a trend a national trend, but I'm a believer that you can turn things around with the right effort and the right people. And it's something that you're going to need to do if you want to just kind of flatline where you are.
I see that as if we bring a chief on, that could be one of his primary responsibilities as well.
It's bigger than
recruiting
that.
and retention of
It's
the
not just,
volunteers.
it wouldn't just be him.
No, it's a whole townwide effort.
You know,
I get it. I heard
he
that.
would be the focal point.
Yes.
But it has to come back to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the overall community as a whole to recognize that they play a vital role of those volunteers. And if they go away completely, your options are put more
Pay for
career put more paid men in, put
Yeah.
more career staff, put more part-timers on.
Right.
Okay.
As an example of a multidiscipline approach, so let's say you wanted to develop a program for seniors or juniors and seniors in the high school to prepare them so that when they graduated, they would be either ready to go to Three Rivers Community College or Salve Maria or another, Anna Maria or another college to get their fire degree to come back, or to be ready to test to go on to become a firefighter. That's all investment, but to do that, you gotta get that through the Board of Ed, you've gotta get a couple of people to lead that. You have to get support from the teachers, there's timing, there's a lot of moving parts. So it's gotta be a community-wide effort. These guys are trying,
Yep.
but I don't think there's a lot of funding, I don't think there's a lot of time available to do that, so it's just gotta be a bigger picture.
Right.
And along the same way, how are we supporting our volunteer firefighters? Right now, each department has their own function and way to do that. Again, it's another one of these coordination things. Let's take a look at that and see if there's an agreement we can come up with is, we're gonna do this so far and that so far. And again, that could be anything from a $1 per call number to supporting them to go to Three Rivers at night and to get ready to become a career firefighter.
Right.
Again, but right now they're this way. Again, it's just another one of these things where two different thought processes have created two different systems. Again, we talked about this. You need to get a committee to, again, multidisciplinary committee to get together, look at the buildings and see the things that need to be repaired, see the things that need to be enhanced. And, down the line, there's programs and volunteerism, and I'm not saying that you have to do this next week or even you have to do this, but some departments, and in fact, your departments used to have bunkmen in the stations, but there's a lot of moving parts to that, but to get the stations ready to do that, for more than just during storms and whatnot. And again, I think everybody would agree, including both the departments and you and the finance board, and anybody else for that matter, would agree that if you had a written, documented capital plan that was solid, now things are gonna break, things are gonna need to be replaced, but that was solid looking at, we're gonna do this here. There are some plans that are out there, particularly with the replacing of equipment, some of the physical equipment, the rescue equipment and some of those things. But looking at, and you have a plan for the apparatus. But if you're looking at some of the bigger picture items, they're all big dollars. Again, this goes back, but to be able to do this, you gotta fix the funding problem
Right.
so that you don't have to ask the ambulance association for 2/3 of the money for the rescue truck.
Right.
Okay, so again, those kind of things all swirl together. Again, this is the organizational statement, we talked about that already, that's that. This is the fire department. John, would you want to talk to this one? This is a little bit more your.
Yeah, when we sat down with the water company or the water department and sat down and went over the maps, and we talked about where the domestic water system development
Right.
was gonna go and any plans for the future, it became evident that some of that was pretty much where it is, unless some major change occurs. This directly impacts the Flanders Fire Department because a significant amount of their area remains unhydranted, and which has a direct impact on what apparatus that they use and respond out of that station. And we have to, support for them to have that second engine to bring the water to the scene. But I think a good formal rural water policy for that area would help everyone visualize that process versus, why do they need a second engine? Obviously there's need up on the highway, but there's also that need to be able to bring that water to the scene. Now, but I'll also tie that back into helping the volunteers, because you're gonna need the volunteers to drive that apparatus, so it's a package deal. But coming up with a good plan and having it so that if there are any more developments that do not bring a the addition of the water system into those developments, that they have a solid plan of what the developer would have to do for fire water, and just include it in that plan, so that
Zoning, planning,
it's all done.
yep.
Along the
That's a
same,
good point.
the other thing we found, John, you want to talk about this one as well?
And then one of the comments that came back to me from the water department was just to make sure that the booster pump stations don't all have the capacity for dealing with a high fire flow beyond them.
Right.
So the fire departments should have a good plan in place to be able to go pump around those stations when they do that. So we just wanted not to lose that thought, and we put it in as a recommendation for them to come up with a standing plan of this is how we do it. And when they do their responses, whether it's the incoming engines from across town or how they set it up, we left it up to the department.
Again, this might be a repeat. Well,
It kind of is.
yeah, it's a
It kind
little,
of
it's
is.
different. I worded it a little bit differently, but then it was in a different section. Again, it brings back the point that we need to do this as a team. And the more we work as a team, we all figure out the same stuff. The other thing too, again, the coordinated training plan between the volunteer staff, career staff. It should involve not only the required OSHA stuff, but we should be doing some up-to-date fire service best practices. Again, the training that was developed and has been given is good training. It's just not consistent across the board.
And we got a lot of feedback from individuals during individual interviews that they weren't spending a lot of time with their counterparts from the other side of town, practicing some of the skill sets that they would be doing if they were actually in an event during the day. And one of the things that hammered that home was the question of when you respond out of the station at 11 or 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, what goes through your head for where your resources are coming from? And their answers pretty much said, across the board, it was from the other career guys from within the community. And that kind of gave light to the whole thing about we have guys all responding to the calls all day long as career department members, but they don't train together because they wear different uniform.
Patches, yeah.
So that's where that comes from, what the driver is on that.
And this last one is just, this one here is just looking at a regional approach to try to come up with a basic training facility. You get just some food for thoughts. It's very difficult to do all the things you need to do in training for the fire attack when you don't have a tower and you don't have the ability to do that. It's just common sense. And this could be similar tract as the dogs and the boats and everything else. So we just want to say thank you. Thank you for the cooperation from the fire departments. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to do the study. And do you guys have any questions?
I'm sure there might be a few. Would anyone like to go first? Then
I'll lead off.
Sure, thank you.
I have to admit that I only got as far as page
Would you
94.
give her a microphone?
Oh, here.
I apologize, that happens.
But recommendation number 2, which happens to be on page 21, when possible, career staff and available volunteer personnel should accompany the fire marshal and staff. I think we operate on a pretty lean number of staffing, and I don't know how this would be possible without hiring additional personnel if you're going to take these people out of the fire station.
I apologize, it's a fireman thing. We would take the vehicles with us. So we're on duty, able to respond. So we would just take whatever we were assigned to. So let's say we would take an ambulance and engine. Again, that'd be up to the chiefs. But you would take that equipment with you so that if you had to leave from there to go somewhere else, you would just leave that. It's just the opportunity to give those guys eyes on the hazards.
It's a firefighter safety thing by getting them in and letting them pre-plan the building while it's under construction. They can see parts of the building they won't see after it's fully constructed, and it prepares them better to deal with an emergency within the building.
So the suggestion is not that they go on regular, routine, annual inspections. It's
no.
for new occupancy permits.
Yes.
Who would that staff be?
It would, you could do both firehouses, you could do both departments, you could do one department at a
But
time.
who in the hierarchy would be?
Well,
who would be recommended?
someone from the fire marshal's office would go,
Which is,
and then-
doesn't, yep.
and then the whoever the career staff was on duty, and then you could offer it up to whoever's available from the volunteer companies.
So not necessarily the deputy chief that you're recommending, but actually career firefighters,
Yes.
Full-timers, yeah.
full-timers.
Yeah.
Full-timers, yeah, and volunteers.
And the
This isn't-
volunteers.
This is opened up for everybody. This isn't for one.
So it's just if there ever is a fire there, there's some eyes in that building, it's not for inspection or
A
anything,
great
it's just so.
a great example, and I've only been in this building twice, and luckily I was able to remember where the bathroom was, but I don't know anything about this building. So if I was a new firefighter, right, or I hadn't had the opportunity, or this building was under construction, it behooves me to get into that building and look around, so I know what's gonna be there when the walls are all up. And then when it's all done, come in to see if it's how I thought it was gonna be in my mind. It's also, let me get ahead of this, because I know there's some concerns. It also has to do with if you're available. Obviously, if you're on an ambulance call, you can't do both. I'm gonna end up breaking this by the time we're done.
Or you have
I'm
an-
Italian,
You would be
I
the
apologize.
first.
Or you're the volunteer that truly is a
You're off
volunteer. and he
You're
has
off
a-
that day, you're off that
reservation.
day, so you would accompany whoever was doing that.
Do you recommend keeping an official list of people that visited it, so if there ever was a fire? you
No,
say
it's
so
not,
and so-
it's
so
not
it's-
that detailed. It
Okay.
would not necessarily be that
So
detailed.
it doesn't go that far?
No, it's just
Yeah,
an
okay.
opportunity. What I would do is that I would coordinate to try to get as many people as possible. So if I felt that I did not, let's just say, I didn't want to bring everybody that's on duty in one particular spot for an hour, I only want to bring half the group. I might bring Niantic one day, and maybe I bring Flanders the next. I could do it all together. Again, I'm gonna leave that to the folks that know the turf better than I do to figure out how to work that plan. But the idea is to get people inside to see when it's opened up, so they'll know that there's a hazard. I'll give you a great example as a chimney. Some of the new modern chimneys. Some of those, you wanna see how that's constructed before it's all closed up. So that if you ever have a chimney fire, you know the best way to attack it.
I'm sorry to hijack your question.
That's all right.
Are you talking about any residential building, or are you talking about commercial buildings, or?
I would leave that up to the leadership to figure that out.
Nick, have
It's
you,
that fluid.
have you ever, because you can't get everyone there, we've heard in the report that you can't get everyone to training. Has those tours ever been used to bring information and training back to the folks who couldn't attend?
You can do that.
I know looking at a plan is totally different than looking at a building.
Well, that's
but-
it.
But looking at a plan by looking at nothing may have some value.
I've seen